Welcome back. We are still in Module 1 and we'll finish it up today. And what we're going to cover as the last part of Module 1 is the different notes, top note, middle note, and base note, and the different therapeutic effects of and residences of the different types of the plant parts that are used, that are distilled to get the essential oils. And I realized last time when we went over the Materia Medica, I made brief mention of, but neglected to go a little bit more in depth about the lists at the front of your Materia Medica. So they're a good thing to take a look at. So make sure that you look through those. Obviously, it starts out with the essential oils broken down into TCM categories. So you got that. And then following that, and there's some different categories too. When you get to the end, there's like for 5-element diagnosis, so there's wood excess, wood deficiency, fire excess, fire deficiency, and so on. And then it goes a little bit into the chemical constituents and what those are and the different therapeutic actions that those different components have. So if you're into that and that resonates with you, that's another good section to look at. And then it lists out the different main oils that fall into those various chemical constituent categories. A couple pages of that. And then they're broken down by note, middle note, top note. The essential oils are broken down by note in lists, as you can see there. And then we have oils that are not for children, not for pregnancy, not for direct topical application, and the oils that are photosensitive. And again, as we go through the Materia Medica, we will be making note of those things and pointing them out. And also, as I recommended earlier, for those major ones, I would go through and make a note on each page of that individual oil, of that contraindication. And then if you're going to be using essential oils for skincare, there's a helpful list there. And then it gets into the individual oils. So yeah, those are some of the other helpful little tools in the Materia Medica. Okay, now let's talk about notes. So as we explore notes, either as you're listening to this or right after, or you could pause right now and go gather oil or two. I can give you some suggestions actually, if you have access to oils and you want to be doing this as you're listening. Some examples to smell of top note oils would be peppermint, eucalyptus, or orange. Mid notes, fir and lavender. And for base notes, we've got sandalwood, patchouli, rose. So those are some that you could pause right now, go grab an oil or two. It's just fun as we're talking about them to smell and get the experience, but no worries if you don't. You can do it later. Let's see. So starting with top notes. Top notes, the aroma is really easily released. It's immediately available. It diffuses quickly, acts quickly. The scent does not linger long. And so, like I said, I've got this peppermint oil here. I open the bottle, I smell it immediately, I breathe it in, I feel it immediately. It's diffusing right out of the top of the bottle. My eyes can feel it. So that's a classic top note. It's like right out in the air, and now I put the cap back on and it's gone. So they generally linger for like 10 minutes to 2 hours. That's a top note range, 10 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the oil. They act on Wei Qi, that immediate action, and they have a strong action on Wei Qi, and they're the fastest to act, and they can be the fastest to make change. So if someone's in an acute situation and things need to change for them in the moment, a top note oil is a really good bet. And they can also help to draw out middle or base note oils that can be harder to breathe in because they're heavier and less diffuse. So we can add a little bit of a top note oil to mid or base note oils or to a heavy formula to get it out and get it working and speed it up, get it working more quickly. And like I said, some examples to smell: peppermint, eucalyptus, orange. Those are all great top note oils to experience with. And top notes are often leaves, needles, peels, things that interact with the environment around them, Wei Qi, things that grow quickly. They're often from the top or outside of the plant. Top notes. And then middle notes. The aroma is a bit slower to release. Diffuses at a medium rate and lingers longer, stays around a little longer. The top note sort of time frame, or middle note time frame, is 2 to 8 hours. So with the top note, we had 10 minutes to 2 hours. With the middle note, we've got 2 to 8 hours. And with the top notes, jumping back to that for a moment, because they work so quickly and diffuse so quickly, you can use them more regularly throughout the day. So if you're fighting off an exterior wind invasion, you've got a little blend of eucalyptus and peppermint and another top note in a little inhaler, you might be smelling that throughout the day. Every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, that's fine. And then as we move into middle and base note, the frequency of use is going to extend, to a longer time frame because they're going to continue to work for longer due to that slower release rate. So 2 to 8 hours in the middle note, and they act primarily on what I call a daily level. And by daily, I mean like a top note working on the Wei Qi, it's working in the moment. It's working right then. It's working with your Wei Qi in the moment. And then a base note interacting primarily with the Yuan Qi is working on an essence level. That's a slower rate. That's a slower process. That's over time. And then the middle note oils, I think, resonate mostly with that, which I think we would probably say yin qi, that daily substance that we get from what we take in, and that blood and food and nutritive level. A lot of middle notes really resonate with that, and they often affect physiology in that way, stomach and intestines. And they're often very strong to regulate qi. A lot of the qi regulators are middle note oils, and they're often harmonizers. And so they can be used as a harmonizer on their own to help harmonize the qi regulation and that kind of thing, or they can be used as harmonizers within a formula, kind of like Gansao or Datsao herbally. They can help to bring the different components of the formula together and working together well. So they're often harmonizers. And some examples to smell are fir and lavender. Those are good sort of solid middle note oils. I love fir. And then base notes take the longest to diffuse, they linger for the longest, anywhere from 8 hours to 2 to 3 days. So they can last a long time. Like if you take a bath with patchouli, and you don't scrub your bath out afterwards, your bathtub's gonna smell like patchouli the next day. Like it lingers. And sometimes base notes are funny. There's really seem to be two different types of base notes. One where the aroma is bold and strong and hits you right away, and then can often linger still with that strong aroma, and those are typically the florals. So a lot of base notes are flowers, and those ones tend to be really the kind of in-your-face base notes. And then other base notes can be really difficult to get the aroma up, to get the scent up, to get them to move and diffuse and interact. And that tends to be and for example, sandalwood. Like you can open a bottle of sandalwood that hasn't been opened in a while and not get a whole lot aroma-wise out of that. You might have to put it onto a cotton ball or add a little bit of a top note or do something to get the aroma. Those ones are really difficult, particularly in diffusion, to diffuse on their own. They're not really going to diffuse. So if you want to use them in that way, and we'll get to methods of use shortly, don't worry about that. But you're going to want to add a top or at least a mid note in with that base note and into your blend to get that to move. And base notes act at the deepest level. They work with deep changes. They're chronic conditions, so the change is slower but deeper. They're profound. You can work with chronic things, inherited things, because they're working on that yuan level, on that constitutional level. Some examples to smell would be sandalwood and vetiver. They're often flowers, as I mentioned earlier, and it's interesting to think of a base note as a flower, because we talked about the top notes being those things that interact at the tops and at the ends and the outer parts of plants. Well, that's where flowers are. But flowers are the reproductive. They have a reproductive function for the plant, and that gets back to that essence, to that jing, to that deep level. And the floral ones are often quite sort of seductive. Sometimes they almost have an addictive quality to them, like people can become really attached to their strong flower base note, like rose or lang lang. And so they're often flowers. And then keeping in line with that sort of essence of the plant, the reproductive role, they're also often seeds. Seeds are usually a base note, and as well as resins and roots. And then all evaporation times for top, middle, and base notes get accelerated by heat. So lots of diffusers use heat to help them go. And we'll talk, when we talk about methods of use, we'll talk about simple personal individualized steam distillation too, which also uses heat. So those are all get accelerated by heat, which can accelerate their absorption and use and action time. And so, yeah, those are some neat things to keep in mind too, is to do those experiential meditative assignments. And then our last part of Module 1, which we touched a little bit about while talking about the notes, is the plant parts, the parts distilled section in the Materia Medica. They're at the top. And so we'll start with flowers and fruits. And if it would be helpful to have this part of the notes and of the flowers and fruits, or the plant parts that we're just about to talk about in handouts, if you don't feel like if you're taking adequate notes, you're all set. If you feel like a handout would be helpful, let me know, and I can work on putting one of those together, either to post or to hand out when we meet in person. Okay, so plant parts, we'll start with the flowers and the fruits. So flowers and fruits are the full manifestation and expression of the organism. So that's the plant's goal, is to create flowers and fruit. And so the use of their essential oils facilitates this. It facilitates full expression of your essence. Full expression and manifestation of who the person is, of the medical condition that you're trying to work through. So yeah, their flowers and fruits can be really wonderful, that especially on a psycho-emotional level. And they open and release. Flowers open and release their aroma, and fruits open and release fruit and seed. And so that's the therapeutic action that they often have, to open and release. They often affect the sensory organs in the head, so the ears, nose, mouth, eyes. Again, the top of the plants, as well as expression, open the orifices. So this facilitate expression function, I think we pretty much touched on, but it kind of fits into, therapeutically fills two roles, and one is that kind of release exterior role when you're working with a wind invasion or something that you want to release out to the exterior, and also with the psyche of, I'm going to be my fullest self. I'm going to inhabit the full expression of my essence. And I mentioned before, when we talked about base notes, that flowers can be sort of addictive or narcotic. And for that reason, they are something that you would not want to use daily on an ongoing basis. They can be really powerful, work really deeply, but just be mindful of rotating them in and out of formulation and in and out of use. And next we'll talk about leaves and branches. And that's not, especially branches that, I don't know, sometimes we don't think too much about those being distilled, but there are some woods that are distilled, really important woods. And a really cool plant that just popped into my head for the moment, that I think is appropriate to talk about right now, though I hadn't planned to, which is why I'm looking it up to just be able to speak well about it, is the orange plant. So there's sweet orange oil, which probably a lot of people are familiar with. One of my favorite oils, use it a lot, and that is distilled from the peel. And it is a top note oil, and it comes from the peel of the fruit of the orange. And then there's petitgrain. Orange is on page 87, and petitgrain is on page 95. And petitgrain comes from the leaves and stems of a variety of orange tree. And it's a top to middle note, which often leaves and branches and stems are, as we talked about. And it's a top middle note. And then also, from that same species of orange tree, we have neroli, which is orange blossom. And it comes from the flowers, from the blossoms. And it's I would say, more kind of base note. It's listed in here as a mid base, and probably could depend on the batch and the flower or whatever. But so we've got 3 different parts of the plant. We've got the fruit peel, we've got the leaves and the stems distilled together, and then we've got the orange blossom. And that's just sort of a really neat trio. And you can look at those a little bit more closely and think about those. Back to leaves and branches. So leaves and branches, much like in the herbal materia medica, they often circulate. So they're often responsible for a lot of movement of energy and regulation of chi through the channels, through the circuits. So they circulate. And they often affect the humor, the bloods and the fluids, and they can kind of revisiting back up to the circulate function, they are really helpful with regulating wind, and they can help free trapped internal wind, and they help to regulate the conversation between the internal and the external, which, thinking about a plant, kind of makes sense. The leaves are in conversation with the air, with the environment, and then you have the roots down at the base of the plant, and the stems and the wood are kind of in between. So they're regulating the conversation between the inner and the outer, internal and external. And then peels, they have a relationship, they often resonate strongly with Wei Qi. Makes sense. They're on the outside. They're the skin of the plant, and our skin is, Wei Qi. So, and then they also help that relationship between internal and external, because they are the barrier between the internal and the external. They are the interface between the world around the fruit and what's inside the fruit. And they breathe, and they interact, and they absorb, and they release. So that makes a lot of sense that they have that function. And they can affect the skin. And they can affect the skin in some positive and helpful ways, and they can also be a little bit irritating. In particular, orange is a pretty photosensitive oil, something that you want to keep in mind and be cautious with. And then barks and roots. Think about structure when we think about barks and roots, and they often affect our internal structure, our support system, our bones, our fascia. And then resins are really neat. So resins are what the plant releases in an attempt to heal when it is being attacked, usually typically by bugs or fungus or something like that. And when there's a wound in the bark and the plant, they produce these resins to heal. And so they can offer, like a lot of the resins can have the function of helping to create new flesh and wound healing. And then they have the ability to move things. They're more flexible than roots and bark. So they go to those deep places that roots and bark go to, but they go with a little bit more fluidity, a little bit more flexibility, though a lot of the resins are very slow and sticky, but they do have a little bit more ability to move things. And they go to places where we hold things, especially trauma, such as the chest and deep in the abdomen, and oftentimes into the joints. And again, that brings us back to divergent meridians, storing trauma in deep places in the body, and that conversation between Yuan Qi and Wei Qi. And then seeds, just like in herbal medicine, they nourish the essence. They nourish the Jing, because they are the essence and the Jing. and they hold within them the whole blueprint for that plant. They plant that tiny little zinnia seed in the ground, and by mid-July, you've got this giant, flowering, beautiful plant. You plant that acorn, and you end up with an oak tree. It's all in the seed. So they're very nourishing to essence, very nourishing to Jing. And they can take the treatment to the 8 extraordinary level, to the 8 extraordinary vessels, to the Constitution. And they help us evolve who we are. Yeah, so as always, email questions. Let me know if you think handouts on these would be helpful, or if you've got pretty good notes. So in this first module, what we really did, in which I hope you've come away from, is the tools, the definitions, to be able to delve into the Materia Medica. So when you look through the Materia Medica, you have a little bit more information to work with to understand the individual oils. So that was really sort of the overarching goal of this first module, really second module, but first module of really dealing with the information. And so hopefully you feel that way. And if you don't, or as we move forward, you feel like, oh, I thought we covered this, but my understanding isn't as deep as I feel like it should be, or as great as I'd like it to be, just let me know, and we can either go back over some of this stuff when we meet in person, or I can email with you directly to make sure that you're ready to move forward and jump into the Materia Medica. All right.